Single mom was rejected for bringing her son to the interview until the millionaire walked in. The grand lobby of Cole & Partners gleamed under ceiling lights that bounced off polished marble floors. Towering glass walls made the space feel majestic yet cold, as though it belonged only to flawless people with perfect lives. Clara Jensen adjusted the worn jacket on her shoulders, holding tightly to her 4-year-old son, Chad. His small hand clutched hers as his scuffed shoes tapped against the floor. Clara inhaled deeply, trying to hide the trembling inside her chest. She knew today might be her only chance to change their lives. From behind the reception desk, a sharp voice sliced through the silence. "You brought a child to an interview?" It was Victoria Hale, the firm's HR director. Her words stung like ice. Clara straightened her back, keeping her voice calm. "I had no other choice. I couldn't leave Chad alone." Chad pressed against his mother's skirt, his wide eyes wandering curiously around the dazzling space. He wore a pale blue shirt Clara had found in a donation bin and carefully washed the night before. Innocent, he seemed unaware of the tension weighing down the air. Victoria folded her arms, lips curling in disdain. "We recruit professionals here, Ms. Jensen, not playdates. Understand?" Clara swallowed hard, heart pounding. "I brought everything you asked for. I truly need this job." "If you had prepared properly, you wouldn't have brought your son." The words fell like stones. Clara squeezed Chad's hand, forcing a smile to reassure him even as her cheeks burned. Victoria turned to the security guard nearby. "Escort them out, please." Just then, Chad accidentally knocked over a paper cup from the receptionist's desk. Water spilled across the marble, spreading quickly under the bright lights. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. Clara dropped to her knees immediately, pulling tissues from her bag to soak up the spill. Her voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. He didn't mean it. I'll clean it." The lobby fell silent. No one offered help. The only sound was the distant tapping of keyboards. Clara's hand shook as she scrubbed at the water, her worn heels slipping slightly on the floor. Shame pressed against her like an invisible weight. And then the elevator chimed. Out stepped a tall man in a charcoal suit. His stride was steady, composed, the kind of walk that owned every room it entered. The receptionist straightened at once. Even Victoria froze. It was Ethan Cole, CEO and founder of Cole & Partners. At just 35, his name was printed on magazine covers, praised as a visionary in the tech world. Few employees ever saw him up close. But today, here he was. His gaze landed immediately on the scene. A young mother kneeling on the floor, cleaning spilled water with her child beside her. A room full of people avoiding eye contact. Victoria glowering in the corner. Ethan's brows drew together slightly. His voice was calm, deep, unhurried. "Why don't you tell me why you're here?" Clara froze, then lifted her head. "My name is Clara Jensen," she whispered. He gave a small nod and gestured toward the seating area. "Let's sit." Victoria rushed to interject. "Sir, this candidate brought a child to—" "I can see that," Ethan replied smoothly. "I also see she arrived on time and has her materials, so let's hear her out." The air shifted. Clara lowered herself onto a chair, Chad climbing quietly into her lap. Ethan pulled out a chair across from her, elbows resting on his knees, his eyes level with hers. "Take your time," he said gently. "Start wherever makes sense." Clara steadied her breath, smoothing Chad's shirt as she began. "I applied for the administrative support role. I thought maybe it could be a new beginning for me and my son." "Why now?" Ethan asked. "Ethan?" Her eyes fell briefly on Chad before she answered. "Because I can't afford to wait anymore. I need to provide for him." For the first time that morning, the lobby held not judgment, but attention, curiosity, perhaps even respect. Ethan studied her quietly, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. Finally, he spoke. "Would you be willing to take a 2-week trial? Office support, entry level. You'd report directly to me." Clara blinked in shock, hardly believing the words. "Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." Chad clapped softly, his small cheer breaking the tension. Behind them, Victoria looked as if she'd swallowed something bitter. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. "You can start Monday. We have an on-site daycare. Chad will have a place here." Clara rose, clutching Chad tightly, tears pricking her eyes. What Ethan gave her was not pity. It was respect. On Monday morning, Clara Jensen walked into the headquarters of Cole & Partners carrying a mix of nerves and determination. She wore a white blouse, worn but carefully ironed, and clutched her folder tightly. Beside her, little Chad skipped along with his tiny backpack, stuffed with a few toys and a scuffed plastic dinosaur. At the reception, an employee directed them to the on-site daycare. Clara knelt down, kissed Chad's forehead, and whispered, "You'll stay here and play, okay? I'll come get you when I'm done." Chad nodded, hesitant but brave. Soon he was distracted by a box of colorful Lego bricks. Clara lingered at the doorway, relief washing over her as she saw him safe. Inside the office, Clara was given a small desk by the window. An old computer, a swivel chair, and a stack of documents waited for her. She took a deep breath and began entering data, focusing on every keystroke. At first, co-workers only glanced sideways. A few whispered. Clara caught fragments of their words. "Isn't that the woman who brought her kid to the interview? I heard the CEO personally gave her a trial." She pretended not to hear and worked quietly. The day passed quickly. Clara juggled learning new systems with finishing assigned tasks. When 6 o'clock arrived, she stayed longer, clicking through online training modules. Her eyes stung with fatigue, but she refused to stop. One afternoon during lunch, Clara unwrapped a simple egg sandwich. She sat alone at a corner table, eating quickly. Just then, Mr. Ruiz, the elderly janitor often ignored by others, passed by. Clara smiled warmly and gestured to the seat across from her. Seeing his hesitation, she cut the sandwich in half and slid one piece toward him. "I had extra. Please, take it." In truth, it was her only lunch, but her kindness made it impossible for him to refuse. He nodded, his eyes softening with emotion. From the glass door, Ethan Cole stepped out of a meeting and paused. He saw Clara sharing her meager meal with someone who had even less. She looked hungry herself, but she gave anyway. Something in his chest tightened. But not everyone showed compassion. One late afternoon, Clara shut down her computer and reached for her bag to pick up Chad from daycare. A co-worker approached, voice sharp. "You can't keep leaving early. The rest of us have to cover for you." Clara answered calmly, "I stayed late yesterday and finished all my reports. I'll make it up if needed." "This isn't daycare, Clara. You need to choose your priorities." Her lips pressed into a line, bracing for more scolding. But then a deep voice spoke from behind. "You can go." They both turned. Ethan stood there, steady, watching. The co-worker stammered, "I was just saying." "I know, and I also know who completed their work. You may leave." The co-worker flushed and walked away. Clara stood frozen, heart racing. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Are you all right?" Clara nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Take tomorrow off. You've earned it." She opened her mouth to protest, but he was already walking away. That night, in the dim light of their rented room, Clara held Chad as he slept. She kept seeing Ethan's eyes in her mind, not pitying, but recognizing. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Night fell over the city. Towers glowed against the skyline. Traffic pulsed endlessly as though the streets never slept. Inside the top-floor penthouse, Ethan Cole sat alone at a long dining table, dinner plated neatly before him, untouched. The apartment was immaculate, too perfect. Polished floors, glass walls overlooking Manhattan, glittering below. Yet silence made it feel like a hollow box, echoing only with memories he could never quiet. His gaze lingered on a glass of red wine, his thoughts drifting back to the face of his younger sister, Lily, 7 years old, bright-eyed, always drawing butterflies on scraps of paper. That day, Ethan had been 12. Angry at his parents for grounding him, he had slipped out to meet a friend. Just 15 minutes, he told himself. But when he returned, the house was burning. Flames devoured the walls. Lily was trapped inside the living room. They told him later she probably never woke up, but the words never eased the guilt. From then on, Ethan buried himself in work. He studied relentlessly, built a company from the ground up, and achieved everything the world praised: money, power, recognition. But every night when the city quieted, he still sat alone, listening to silence that pressed like a weight. Lately, his thoughts strayed to Clara Jensen. He remembered the sight of her offering half her sandwich to the old janitor, though she barely had enough for herself. He remembered her standing firm under a coworker's criticism, not pleading, just enduring with quiet dignity. Something about Clara made her unforgettable. It wasn't pity. It was strength hidden in fragility. It was pride he recognized even when she knelt on the marble floor, cleaning spilled water during her interview. While Ethan possessed everything the world envied: fortune, influence, acclaim, Clara had almost nothing except grit and the love she carried for her son. And yet, she walked forward with her head held high. That night, Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. A question pressed against his chest. When was the last time I built something that truly mattered? Could she be reminding me of the reason I started this company, not just to profit, but to change lives? Across town, in a cramped, rented room, Clara lay with Chad asleep in her arms. The ceiling was stained, the wind slipped through cracks in the door. But in her embrace, the boy was safe. Clara smoothed his hair and whispered softly, "As long as I'm breathing, you'll never be left alone." 2 worlds apart. A man in a lavish penthouse, surrounded by silence. A woman in a bare room, surrounded by love. And in the vast distance between them, an invisible thread was slowly pulling tighter, drawing them closer together. It was a Sunday afternoon, the sky clear and blue, the Central Park alive with people. Guitar chords drifted from one corner, mingling with the laughter of children and the steady rhythm of joggers. Clara Jensen sat with Chad on the grass near the duck pond. The little boy crouched, tugging at a plastic bottle tangled in the grass. Clara bent down to help, then asked softly, "Do you know where this belongs, Chad?" He looked up with bright eyes, then pointed to a trash can a few yards away. Clara nodded with encouragement. Chad darted over, tossed the bottle inside, and ran back grinning as if he had just completed an important mission. Clara brushed his hair back gently. "See, we don't wait for others to do what's kind. We can make the world kinder ourselves." A deep voice sounded behind her. "Looks like I just found the city's newest cleanup crew." Clara turned quickly. Standing beneath a tree was Ethan Cole. He wasn't in his usual suit, but in jeans and a rolled-up shirt, looking unexpectedly approachable. Chad lit up. "Mr. Ethan!" Ethan walked forward, bowing slightly to the boy as though he were a young gentleman. "Good afternoon, Chad." The boy giggled, clutching his mother's hand. Clara felt a flush of embarrassment, but she couldn't stop a smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," Ethan replied, his eyes brighter than usual. "But I'm glad I did." For a brief moment, silence fell between them, broken only by the rustling of leaves. Then Chad piped up, "Mom, I'm hungry. Pizza?" Clara shook her head. "Not today, sweetheart." But Ethan was already pulling out his phone. "There's a wood-fired pizza place nearby, outdoor tables. Let me treat you both." Clara looked at her son, then at Ethan. His expression wasn't polished or corporate. It was sincere. She hesitated, then nodded softly. "All right." They sat beneath a striped umbrella at a small wooden table. Chad colored on the kids' menu while Clara picked at her salad. Ethan had taken off his outer shirt and rolled up his sleeves, looking more like an ordinary man than a multimillionaire CEO. He said quietly, "What you told Chad back there? I thought it was beautiful." Clara chuckled softly. "I only say that when there's trash involved." "No, that's parenting, teaching him not to wait for kindness, but to make it." Clara paused, startled. She wasn't used to anyone framing her actions that way. They talked about Chad, about Clara's patchwork jobs over the years, about Ethan's early struggles building his company. Nothing glamorous, but the conversation flowed easily, the distance between them shrinking with every word. As they left the cafe, a cool breeze swept by. Chad sneezed. Clara reached into her bag, but Ethan was faster. He slipped off his jacket and draped it around the boy's shoulders. "You didn't have to," Clara murmured. "I did," Ethan said simply. Chad snuggled into the oversized coat, smiling. Clara looked up at Ethan, and for the first time, she didn't see the powerful CEO from magazine covers. She saw a man who noticed the small things, who cared for her child without hesitation. Something tugged inside her chest. Perhaps between them, something had already begun. The rumors began with a few photographs. One morning, as Clara walked into the office, the atmosphere felt different. Strange glances, whispers loud enough for her to hear. She checked her phone, and her heart sank. On the company forum, a post read, "Single mom dating the CEO? Golden ticket to the top?" Below were two blurry photos taken from a distance. One of Clara with Chad in the park, Ethan walking beside them, draping his jacket over the boy's shoulders. Another of them at the pizza cafe on Sunday. The comments were cruel. No wonder she got hired. Bet the CEO likes late nights with his special assistant. Playing the sympathy card, classic. Clara shut off her phone, cheeks burning. She wanted to vanish, but Chad was at daycare. She couldn't just leave. By noon, an email arrived in her inbox. "Please report to HR. Conference Room B, 2 p.m. The sender, Victoria Hale. Clara knew exactly what it meant. Conference Room B was closed tight, blinds drawn. Victoria sat across the table. Beside her was Mr. Gaines, the company's legal advisor. A brown envelope lay on the table, sharp and final. Victoria began, "Ms. Jensen, there are concerns about your relationship with Mr. Cole." Clara lifted her chin, voice steady. "I don't have a personal relationship with him. I just do my job." Gaines leaned forward, tone hard. "This isn't about your private life. This is about perception, liability, and protecting the company. The posts are out there, and we must respond." Victoria slid the envelope toward Clara. "This is a voluntary resignation. No fuss, no marks on your record. Sign it, and this ends quietly." Clara stared at the paper inside. Her hand trembled. Every late night studying, every hour she stayed to finish tasks, about to vanish because of gossip. She thought of Chad, waiting with his Lego blocks at daycare, believing in her. She thought of his small dream that one day he could be proud of his mother. Her voice wavered. "May I have a moment?" Victoria nodded briskly. "Of course, the sooner the better for everyone." Clara took the pen, drew a breath. Just then, the door opened. Everyone turned. Ethan Cole walked in, sleeves rolled, no tie, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "If this is an HR meeting, keep the door open. Nothing to hide." Victoria stiffened. "Mr. Cole, this is a private session." "Then make it public." Ethan cut her off, stepping up beside Clara. "I've seen the photos, I've read the gossip. Let me be clear, any decision to keep or promote Clara Jensen was made on merit, ethics, and performance. Nothing else." Gaines cleared his throat, pressing on. "Mr. Cole, the concern is optics. The company could suffer reputational risk." Ethan's voice hardened. "Questioning her integrity is questioning mine. I won't allow it." Silence fell. Victoria's lips pressed thin. Ethan turned to Clara, his voice gentler. "You don't need to sign. You've done nothing wrong." Clara looked at him. For the first time, he wasn't the distant CEO, but a man standing beside her, not above her. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because you matter, and because the hardest workers shouldn't be the most vulnerable." He picked up the envelope, tore it in two, and dropped it in the trash. "Ms. Jensen, you're dismissed. From this meeting, not from this company." Clara sat frozen, relief washing over her. Then she rose, no longer bowing her head, but holding it high. As they walked out together, murmurs rippled through the hall. But this time, Clara's steps were steady. Not because Ethan had saved her, but because he had believed in her. Late afternoon. The city wore the golden-orange hue of sunset, light spilling across the tall glass towers. Clara Jensen stood at the last step, leading to the rooftop of Cole & Partners. She inhaled deeply, her hand resting on the cold metal door. The invitation in the email had been brief. Rooftop, 6:15, sent by Ethan's assistant. Clara had almost declined. After the chaos of the past few days, all she wanted was to work quietly. Yet her heart had brought her here. The door opened, wind rushing against her face. The rooftop was nearly empty, except for a lone figure by the railing, hands in pockets, sleeves rolled, his back to her. Ethan Cole. He didn't turn when he heard her steps. His voice was low but steady. "Thank you for coming." Clara walked closer, folding her arms across her chest. "You didn't have to defend me like that in HR. I could have handled it." Ethan turned slightly, his eyes in the fading light carrying both weariness and resolve. "Actually, I had to." Silence. The wind swept past. Then Ethan spoke again, slowly, as if every word weighed heavy. "When I was 12, my sister died in a fire. She was 7. I was supposed to watch her, but I was angry with my parents. I left. Just 15 minutes. When I came back, the house was burning." Clara froze, listening. Ethan's voice grew rough. "They told me she probably never woke up, but that never eased the guilt. I built 100 things, this company, this life, just to feel worthy of still being here. But I've never really felt enough." Clara stepped closer. His eyes held no tears, but an ocean of silence. She whispered, "You don't owe anyone redemption. Surviving isn't a sin." Ethan looked away, shaking his head slightly. "I know, but it doesn't erase the needing." A pause, then he met her gaze directly. "When I saw you standing there, holding your son, facing judgment, yet keeping your head high, I remembered why I started all this. You saved more than yourself. You reminded me this work has to matter." Clara's throat tightened, tears threatened, but she held them back. Step by step, she moved closer until only a breath separated them. Ethan hesitated, then extended his hand. Clara placed hers into it. His hand was warm, steady. No more words were needed. The wind rushed on, the city roared below. But up here, there were only 2 people, both scarred, both brave enough to stand side by side. And in that moment, neither of them felt alone. Rain poured in sheets. The night sky was gray, wind lashing against the worn windows of Clara Jensen's rented room. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into a plastic bucket in the corner. Power had gone out hours ago, leaving the room damp and dark. On the small bed, Chad shivered under a blanket, whispering, "Mom, I'm cold." Clara pulled him closer, holding him tight, pressing her cheek to his damp hair. Her eyes drifted to the phone on the table. Only one name came to mind. She hesitated for a long time. Finally, her trembling fingers typed, "Power out? Roof leaking? Chad, cold. I didn't know who else to call. Sorry." The message sent. Less than a minute later, a reply. "On my way. 15 minutes." Clara exhaled, not knowing whether it was relief or fear. 15 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside the shabby building. Ethan Cole stepped out, holding a large umbrella. When he saw Clara carrying Chad, both soaked through, he said nothing, just covered them with the umbrella and gently lifted the boy into his arms. "You're both drenched," he said softly. "I'm fine," Clara answered, her voice trembling, not from the cold. Ethan didn't argue. He drove them straight to his penthouse. The apartment glowed warm, lights golden against polished wood. Ethan fetched towels and soft robes for Chad, who giggled when wrapped in fabric that trailed to the floor. Clara, still uneasy, stood in the kitchen doorway in her damp clothes. Ethan handed her an oversized shirt and leggings from a donation box, still neatly folded. Moments later, Clara emerged barefoot in the kitchen, stirring pasta on the stove. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her move as if she had belonged there all along. "You didn't have to cook. You drove through the storm for us. Dinner is the least I can do," Clara replied without turning. The smell of tomato sauce filled the air. Chad sat on the rug, piecing together Lego dinosaurs. Soon the three of them ate together at the table. Ethan ate quietly, glancing at mother and child with an expression softer than his usual. After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch Chad's chosen animated film. Halfway through, the boy fell asleep, head resting on Ethan's arm, his small hand curled into Ethan's sleeve. Clara sat close, knees tucked up, eyes on her son. Her voice trembled. "I'm scared." Ethan turned, brow furrowed. "Of what?" "Of hoping too much. I've learned to live without a lot, but imagining more, imagining Chad having a real home, it terrifies me. I'm afraid it'll vanish." She looked away, hiding damp eyes. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice steady, yet gentle. "Let me carry that hope for both of you until you're ready to hold it yourself." Clara looked at him. In the soft light, his eyes offered no grand promises, only truth and steadiness, and in that moment she felt something rare, safe. 2 years had passed. The grand hall of Cole & Partners was no longer the place Clara Jensen once walked through under whispers and judgment. Today she stood tall on stage in a simple blazer, her hair neatly tied back. On her chest hung a new name badge, Director of Training and Development. Before her was a packed auditorium, reporters, employees, partners. In the front row sat Chad, now 5, holding his toy dinosaur with wide, shining eyes. Beside him was Ethan Cole, dressed in a sharp navy suit, but his attention wasn't on the cameras. His gaze stayed fixed on the mother and son on stage. Clara held the microphone, her voice still trembling, but her eyes steady. 2 years ago, I walked into this place with almost nothing but hope and determination. Today, we launched the Fresh Start program, designed to support single parents seeking a second chance, because I believe no one should be left behind simply because of circumstance. Applause thundered across the room. Chad jumped to his feet, waving at her. "Mom, I'm here!" Laughter rippled through the hall. Clara laughed too, her eyes glistening. Ethan watched, the corners of his mouth lifting, pride clear in his eyes. After the ceremony, the three of them stepped into the small park behind the building. The afternoon sun spread gold across the grass. Chad ran ahead, full of energy, while Clara and Ethan walked side by side. Clara spoke softly. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here today, I wouldn't have believed them." Ethan's voice was low but firm. "You earned it, not by luck, by your own strength." Clara turned, meeting his gaze. For a moment, silence. But in that quiet, both knew this was only the beginning of something greater. Not just a career, but a life. A weekend afternoon, the park was bathed in sunlight. On the wide lawn, children twirled and laughed in a free outdoor dance class. Chad wore a bright yellow t-shirt, shorts, and glittery sneakers. He spun clumsily, but his face glowed with joy. Clara Jensen stood at the edge, holding a tote filled with homemade cookies. Beside her, Ethan Cole crouched down, carefully tying Chad's shoelaces before the boy dashed back out. "Ready for your big debut, champ?" Ethan teased. "Yes." Chad grinned and bolted into the crowd of kids. Clara laughed. Ethan rose, dusting off his hands, his eyes following Chad's every move. It was an ordinary moment, yet Clara felt an extraordinary warmth swell in her chest. When Chad spun too fast and nearly toppled over, he shouted loudly, "Mom, Dad, look at me." Clara froze. Her heart skipped. The word Dad had slipped so naturally from her son's lips. She turned to Ethan, ready to say something. But he didn't look startled. Instead, he smiled softly, eyes warm, and quietly reached for her hand. Clara glanced at his hand, hesitated only a beat, then let him hold it. The late sun stretched across the grass. Chad kept dancing, unaware he had just opened a new door for his mother and Ethan. The wedding took place on a quiet beach. No lavish gown, no grand guest list, only a few close friends, the soft murmur of waves, and sunlight spilling gold across the sand. Clara Jensen walked down a path lined with wildflowers, her simple white dress flowing with the breeze. Chad ran ahead, scattering petals with childlike abandon, his small shoes leaving prints in the sand. At the end of the aisle stood Ethan Cole, barefoot in a white linen shirt, his eyes alight as he watched them come closer. The officiant smiled. "Ethan Cole, do you take this woman and her child as your family, your future, your forever?" Ethan looked at Clara, then at Chad clutching her hand, and nodded. "I already have." "And you, Clara Jensen, do you take this man, not just for yourself, but for your son, as a husband and a father, to walk with you through every storm?" Clara's voice trembled, but it was strong. "With all my heart." Chad stood between them, holding both their hands, his eyes shining as though he understood this moment would never fade. After the simple wedding on the beach, the lives of Clara Jensen and Ethan Cole unfolded into a new chapter, one filled with laughter, footsteps echoing through the halls, and mornings that no longer felt empty. Mornings in the vast apartment were no longer silent. The patter of Chad's little feet echoed down the halls, followed by bursts of laughter. Ethan, once defined by reports and strict schedules, now found himself tying his tie while the boy crouched beside him, firing endless curious questions. Clara began her days at the Fresh Start Center, but she was no longer alone. In the evenings, when she returned, someone was there, waiting with dinner set out, with warm eyes, and with hands ready to share the weight. Then one early autumn afternoon, Clara held an ultrasound photo in trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. "Ethan," her voice cracked, "we're having another baby." For a moment, he was still. Then he pulled her into his arms. The steady face of a powerful CEO broke, replaced with trembling joy, so pure it stunned them both. In the months that followed, Ethan changed. He rearranged work to come home earlier. On weekends, he took Clara and Chad to strolls in the park, walks along the river, cozy little cafes. He listened patiently when Clara said she was tired, made breakfast with a smile, even knelt to slip shoes onto her feet when her belly grew too heavy. Chad brimmed with excitement, pressing his ear against his mother's stomach. "Can the baby hear me? I'll play with you, I promise." And then the day came. In the delivery room, Clara clutched Ethan's hand, sweat beading her forehead, her eyes fierce with determination. Ethan stayed at her side, whispering encouragement with every breath. A cry rang out. A tiny baby girl, pink and fragile, was placed in Clara's arms. Tears spilled, not only from the mother's eyes, but from Ethan's, eyes that had once hidden everything. He bent close, whispering, "Welcome to the family." Chad sat wide-eyed on a chair, watching his sister in awe. He reached out, touched her tiny hand, and gasped when her fingers curled tightly around his. That day, in a hospital room flooded with light, the four of them sat together, not lost souls anymore, but a whole family. Clara leaned against Ethan's shoulder, smiling softly. "I never thought I'd have this." Ethan squeezed her hand. "There will be many more days like this, because this is only the beginning." Outside, the late sun streamed through the window, wrapping them in golden warmth, as if the world itself paused just to bless this family that had fought so hard to find each other. And in that moment, their story closed, not with an ending, but with a truth. Real happiness is having a place to return to, and people who never let go.